الرحيم رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. One of the really well-known stories in the Quran is the story of Musa alayhi salam. In fact, the story of Musa alayhi salam is said so much, it's repeated so much, that some of our scholars said, كَانَ الْقُرْآنَ أَنْ يَكُونَ مُوسَى. The Quran was almost going to be entirely about Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. So in one of the stories, where Allah tells us about the story of Sayyidina Musa, we're told about when he's forced out of Egypt. He's exiled out of Egypt. So I'm going to briefly tell part of the story just so that we get a sense of what Musa was going through. Musa alayhi salam was walking one day in the marketplace and he saw a non-Jewish person fighting a Jewish person. And so he stepped in to defend the Jewish person and he hit the other guy, just a basic hit from Sayyidina Musa, but Musa alayhi salam was so strong that he ended up killing the man by accident. This is how strong Sayyidina Musa was. Just as a side story, because there's some young guys in the room, you might like the story. It's once said that the angel of death, when he came down to take the soul of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, Sayyidina Musa felt like his business, like his mission wasn't done, so he punched him and knocked out his eye. So the angel of death went back up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and complained, Musa punched me and knocked out my eye. This is how strong Sayyidina Musa was. So he killed this man with one blow. And then the next day, the same man that he was defending was in another fight. And he called Musa to defend him again, and Musa kind of took sides against him, so the man called him out. He said, you're the one who killed yesterday, and now you're going to kill me. So word got back to the palace that Musa had killed this non-Jewish person, and someone came running from the palace and told Musa, you have to leave because they want to kill you. Right? They want to convict you and kill you. So Musa had to leave Egypt, he had to leave his homeland. So he was living in the palace at the time. So now he goes from living in the palace to being homeless, being a drifter, no means, no money, he doesn't know where he's going, doesn't know anybody that he's going to meet, he has no clue what's happening, where he's going to get food from, and so on. As he's going on the road, he sees this well, he sees a bunch of people trying to get water from the well. On the side he sees two women that need his help, and he helps them get water from the well. And then he leaves the meat, he goes and sits under the shade of a tree. And he says a very wonderful dua. He says, Oh Allah, indeed I am extremely poor, or I am in extreme need of whatever good you may give to me. And just then, one of those two women that he helped comes running to him, and they tell him, my father wants to meet you because of the way that you help us. So he goes and he meets the father, and the father tells him, he asks him about a story, and then he tells him, I want to employ you, I want to give you a job for 8 years. And I want to marry you one of my daughters. And you can accept the deal if you like. And if you want, you can go 10 years instead of 8. So Musa alayhi salam chose to take the job. So I mentioned the story for the following reason. Musa alayhi salam, when he left Egypt, he was afraid for his life. He thought he was under the threat of death, which he was. He had no money. He had no idea where he was or where he was going, and he had no job, no means, no one to help him, no connection, no network, nothing. But he did what he could. And he made this one dua, and now all of a sudden, in a blink of an eye, he goes from being homeless and moneyless to having a job, a wife, and a home with a righteous father-in-law. The name that we're discussing tonight is the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ar-Razzaq. Now you guys may have done before the name of Al-Wahhab, have you?
Not yet.
Not yet. So one of the names very closely related to the name of Ar-Razzaq is the name of Al-Wahhab. Difference is, Al-Wahhab is a gift. It means Allah is the one who gives gifts. Ar-Razzaq is the one who gives you your sustenance, like what you live off of. It's what gives you what you earn. The difference between a gift and risk or sustenance is that sustenance you have to earn. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gives us everything that we earn. And that's what the name of Ar-Razzaq is. A few very important points about this name of Ar-Razzaq. Number one, it applies to every being on this earth. So Allah says in the Quran, and He is the one that gives the rizq to every creation. So plants, when they get water from the rain and they get sunlight from the sun, or you don't get sunlight from anything but the sun, they get light from the sun, that is the rizq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When an animal eats from that plant, that's his rizq. And when we eat that animal, that's our rizq. All of them come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Absolutely none of them are outside the realm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's number one. Number two is that while it's something that we earn, it's completely dictated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. While it's something that we earn, it's completely dictated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's another very famous story in the Quran that I mentioned on Saturday, where there's a very rich man from Bani Israel. And I told you guys his treasure was so wealthy that even the keys were too heavy for one man to hold. It took two men just to hold up his keys to his treasure. When they reminded this man to be thankful of Allah, what did he say? He said, this is from, I earned this money because of my own intelligence. Right? I'm just smart enough that I made it. Allah tells us afterwards in the Quran that Allah gave him that money because He willed to give it to him. So I mentioned these things for the following reason. I think there are three things that we should take away from this name of Ar-Razzaq, and I'll end with these three things, inshallah. The first thing is that nobody's self-worth, nobody's worth in our eyes or our own worth should be determined on how much rizq we have. Meaning, it doesn't matter how rich or poor a person is. The Sahaba, the greatest men to ever walk the face of the earth, some of them were the poorest of their time. Abu Hurairah, who's one of the most, who has some of these, like I think the second or third largest narrator, the second largest narrator about hadith is Abu Hurairah. He was one among the poorest men of Medina. He never had any money. And there are a lot of stories of Abu Hurairah being so hungry that he would sit in the masjid and make loud noises so that some of the other Sahaba can hear him and take notice of him. And he would just make noises randomly so that people might give him some food. That's how poor he was. But he was among he was one of the best people to ever walk the face of the earth. Right? Some of the Sahabas, during the Battle of Khandaq, they were so hungry they didn't have any food, they had to tie rocks to their stomach just so that they won't feel as hungry. And they went to Rasulullah to complain, and he had 2 rocks instead of 1 tied to his stomach for how hungry he was. So whether you're rich or poor does not determine how good of a person you are, because the rizq comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It does not come from us. So you don't judge yourself by whether you have money or not, and you don't judge others by whether they have money or not, because that's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the first thing I think we take away. The second thing that I think we have to take away, I mentioned the difference between Al-Wahhab and Ar-Razzaq. Wahhab is a gift. Allah just gives gifts to whomever He wants. Right? He wants to give you $1 million for free, that just falls from the sky, He can do it if He wants to. Ar-Razzaq means you have to actually work for it, and this is the only criteria that we have. The only thing we have to do is strive. So long as we work hard, Allah will give us rizq. This is His sunnah. You have to work for rizq. If you don't work, you don't get any rizq. So you can't just sit back and say, I'm going to make $1 million, it will never come to you. That's not rizq, that's what Allah gives you. Rizq, the rizq that Allah gives you has to come with work. So the more you work, the more likely you will get rizq. But you have to do something. You have to take a certain step to get it. And the third thing that I want to end with, oftentimes we fall into the trap of thinking that it's just our physical striving. So if I study really hard and I get really good grades and I become a doctor, then Allah gives me really good rizq. Or if I work really hard, I work 20-hour days, or I work 80, 90-hour weeks, then Allah will give me rizq. Interestingly, in the Quran, Allah tells us, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزِقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. And whoever has taqwa in Allah, whoever is conscious of Allah, meaning whoever lives his life by the laws of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open up doors for him that he never thought possible, and He will make it easy for him, and He will bring him rizq from areas that he never even considered. And I'll leave you with one last example to make this last point awareness. The first story from Sayyidina Musa was one example, but here's another example. Sayyidina Hajar, when she was in the desert in Mecca, and her son is dying of hunger, and she has no food, she starts running between, you guys know the story, right? What does she start doing? Go ahead. She starts running between Safa and Marwa. How many times? 7 times. And what's that called? When we do it, what's it called? Sa'i. Sa'i means Safa and Marwa. So Sa'i. Sa'i just means to strive. Right? It just means to struggle. It just means to do something. So Sayyidina Hajar was sitting there. She's worried that her son's going to die. She's looking for someone to help her. She starts running from mountaintop to mountaintop. What happens next? Yes. Sayyidina Jibreel comes, by some narrations, Sayyidina Ismail is kicking under his feet, Sayyidina Jibreel comes and digs it with his wing, and the water of Zamzam starts flowing. And it flows so much that Rasul said if it wasn't for Hajar making it a well, it would have become a flowing stream from how much barakah and water was coming out of it. So Sayyidina Hajar had no clue. She thought her and her son were about to die. And immediately in a blink of an eye, because she had taqwa in Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought water from the ground where there was no water. And then afterwards He made people come and establish Mecca, a whole city there. And now millions of people, tens of millions of people every year do the same things that Ibn Hajar does because she did it. So she went in a blink of an eye from being about to die to being someone whose legend and whose message lives on in infamy because she had taqwa in Allah. So let's not fall into the trap that rizq only comes from the means that we think of. Working 90-hour weeks and being a hard worker, being smart, getting all that stuff is important. But rizq also comes from asking Allah for forgiveness and from living your life the way Allah wants us to. So I ask Allah to make us from those who understand His name Ar-Razzaq, and that we are those who are thankful for all the rizq that He gives us. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khair.
That's not using